Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. John Stovall, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, as you said, I'm John Stovall. I am an ex-attorney that has turned to writing LitRPG fantasy since my wife became an author first, and frankly, she was successful enough to allow me to retire, so that's what I do now rather than actually retire.
So you decided to save your soul and quit the legal profession, huh?
There is a very, very real degree of truth to that. Law was not
my
fun.
My uncle was a lawyer, and he foreclosed on a church once, and I was like, Uncle, like it's a church, for crying out loud. And he's like, Jesus got to pay his taxes too. And so now my benchmark for a lawyer is like, if they haven't kicked a church out of their building, like, oh, he's probably okay, or she.
Yeah, I was a 13-year defense attorney, and I also, for the last 2 years, and this is what really, really burned me out, is I was parents' counsel for people that had their children taken away from them. And the number of very, very, very serious cases, extremely high. I mean, basically, every week I had somebody who would either lose their child, lose their freedom, or because I also did some bankruptcy, lose their house and finances pretty much every single week. And after 13 years, I think it had basically ripped my will to live out of me. So this is, I owe my wife a lot because she did allow me to retire. She's pretty successful at what she does. And so I'm able to, I still make decent money, but a lot less than I did as an attorney being an author. So.
Yeah. Are you having fun doing it? That's the important question.
Oh yeah. I spent most of my life, I started dungeon mastering at age 10, and it like tickles the same part of my brain. It's the best way I can say it. So this is also, I know this is going to sound like kind of a jerk thing, but a lot of authors talk about the stress of being an author, and I'm always like, my boy, this is so much better than so many other jobs. I can speak from personal experience. So maybe I'm just enjoying it because it's not being an attorney, but yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I started writing from a writing as therapy class at the VA because they figured like processing your trauma from the war, it was easy to detach by making it fiction. And so like when people talk about that too, I'm with you. I'm like, nobody's shooting at me. I'm not wearing MOP level 4 like hazmat gear. It's not 170 degrees. I'm not standing in asphalt. It's melting on my feet because it got hot enough in Iraq that the asphalt liquefied again. I'm like, no, this is a pretty cushy job. Yeah,
my brother did 2 tours.
Yeah.
And he definitely prefers his current profession. I have absolute respect, for what he did, and he is very happy that he did it. But he's also happy to be done, if that makes any sense.
Yep. What's it, just the old expression? I don't miss the circus, but I damn sure miss the clowns.
Yeah,
it's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. He had a lot of good friends. So yeah.
Yeah. So now, when you say that the dungeon mastering, it tickles the same part of your brain that the writing does. Have you found that since you started writing, you don't game as much, or do you still do both?
I game a lot less. I took dungeon mastering to a completely unrealistic level. I've actually invented 2 entire game systems. Ground up, basically. The one I did with Chamois has like 6,000 pages of material if you count like lore and like modules and all that kind of junk. I invented entire systems, like very complicated systems. Like I know it's going to sound insane, and it'll also probably let I'm a big fan of Star Wars because we have a Agents in Space system, and I invented like an entire ship combat system with like hundreds of ship components you can buy and all the rest of that, and positions that you can like fill as an RPG character that modify the way the ships fight each other and stuff like that. So all that stuff. And we would write personal stories for people. Like we would, in between the game sessions, we would send emails that would be like, oh, this is what happens, choose your own adventure style, pick what you do, and then we would write another response to that, and so on and so forth. And I probably spent 40 to 60 hours preparing for each game session when everything's put together, and that's completely unsustainable while being an author because it does use the same amount of brain power. So my dungeon mastering, I treated it almost like a job, and I'm not even sure. It's about 2,000 hours a year, so I probably put 40,000 hours into dungeon mastering in one form or another. That's and insane. now I barely do it at all. I'm very passionate about my hobbies. Probably should be more passionate about other things, frankly, but very passionate about my hobbies. Yeah.
All right. So before we get any deeper in this, we do have to ask you the religion question. So are you ready for this?
Absolutely.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
So Star Wars is, I want to say I was completely addicted to it and absolutely like deep into it. It's not like I've read every single expanded universe book, but I read a lot of them. I've watched all the movies. I've played a ridiculous number of the games, both tabletop and computer, a couple board games, things like that. I was just very, very, very addicted to it. I mean, Shammy and I started watching The Mandalorian together, and I'd be like, oh, look, he's riding a dewback. Oh, look, that's IG-88. That sort of. I played the card game, all right. That kind of stuff, and I was just absolutely wildly addicted to it. I will admit the last 5 or 10 years has really burned me. I don't know if I would call myself a diehard Star Wars fan, but it'll always occupy a completely unrealistic portion of my brain, I guess. It definitely was foundational for me. I mean, it came out the same year I was born, and I grew up watching that. I think I saw the first Star Wars like 24 times. I also really love Firefly, but and if we were talking about anything that didn't include Star Wars, I would probably just be like a diehard Firefly fan. I've seen, the entire only season that ever came out like 3 times. I've seen the movie like 5. But compared to Star Wars, there basically is nothing in existence that I didn't create myself that I like as much as Star Wars. So,
are you going to watch the second season of Firefly that they're doing with the animated series?
Oh, for sure. Although I did find their little commercial a bit cringy.
Yes.
But I'm still going to 100% absolutely watch it. I love Nathan Fillion especially. I feel like that's what everybody feels like. But all of it is fantastic. So.
Absolutely. All right. And because we're polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Game of Thrones. So with the top one, because even with Star Trek, I like Star Trek. I was doing DS9 with Shammy and stuff. But with this one, I actively dislike both Wheel of Time and Chronicles of Narnia for totally different reasons. For Wheel of Time, I just couldn't get into it. It's not like I guess actively dislike it. It just wasn't for me. But the Chronicles of Narnia, the destruction of, well, I guess it's spoilers, but the way that it ended, it's the only time in my life I've intentionally injured a book, hurled it against the wall, very upset, despite 20 years in the church. That particular ending did not appeal to me at all. And I do like Game of Thrones quite a bit, although again, I'm a little burned out with some of the stuff that's happened, book 5, I guess, 4, 5, the last 2 books, I think, the first 3, I love to death. Last ones are all right, but they're definitely a huge step down. And I kind of get the feeling it's not ever going to complete. So that's weighing on me a little bit, I guess. So none of them rise to the level of my addiction to Star Wars or even remotely close to it, but I definitely like Game of Thrones. Read it, the first one especially, many, many times, not only for enjoyment, but as a attempt to improve my craft. That is some of the most efficient use of writing space I've ever seen in my life.
Okay. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is that we stop asking each other the important question. And thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, we are bringing that back. I'm going to ask you, sir, what is your favorite dinosaur?
So technically it's not a dinosaur, but I think everybody will let it pass. My favorite dinosaur is the Mesosaur. It's the absolutely gigantic. It's technically a lizard, but it's the gigantic sea creature that is the warm-blooded lizard that lives in the sea that is so big it can win fights against like Tyrannosauruses if they go deep enough in the water and things like that. I really like it. I don't know if you were aware of. There's a YouTube channel called Tier Zoo.
No.
Yeah, TIERZOO. He pretends that life, like the universe and stuff, is a game called Outside, and then he like talks about character classes, and it basically just compares animals and he puts them on a tier list. And he had this thing on the Mesosaur, and for the longest time, I guess I didn't really have a favorite dinosaur. I mean, if you forced me, I'd probably pick one, but it wasn't, it wasn't like really addicted to it. But this Mesosaur, man, I love this thing. It was a tiny little lizard, and it got bodied left and right, and it escaped into shallow water, and it had live birth and warm blood, and somehow that was enough to turn it into a god tier creature in just a few million years, and it basically dominated the oceans for the entire length of the dinosaur period. The later half, I think the Jurassic was the last period, I'm pretty sure, but whatever the last period was, just absolutely dominated it. But it's a little story. It's like the farm boy hero, you know what I mean? Like, it just came from nowhere. It was getting bodied by everybody, and all of a sudden it just pulled some jank strat and turned into the god tier ocean creature. So anyway, I thought it was fantastic. I love Mesosaurs.
I will get with you after, and I will find the link for that, and I will link to your listener if you want to check that out as well for that channel. Because when we talk about that kind of stuff, it's always fun to link it and let everyone else experience the nerd joy.
Yeah, it's only like 7 minutes, so it's easy.
Yeah, well, the whole channel. I'm sure he's got other content that's just as awesome. So.
Oh yeah, I love him.
So we at the Blasters and Blades podcast are civilized human beings. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, sir, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Unfortunately, neither. I'm a child. I'm an absolute child. I've never grown up. I'm just a child with money. I still drink. Diet Pepsi. I've drank Diet Pepsi since basically I hit like age 13, and I can't handle anything adult. I can't. If it's not filled with sugar or artificial sugar, I just won't drink it.
So Team Pepsi, not Team Coke?
Team Pepsi, but I don't actually really care. I prefer Diet Pepsi, but it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, if they got one, they got the other. It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay. Well, now that's out of the way. You got the right answers. You get to stay. So when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy, do you have a preference, or do you like both equally?
So I guess both equally, but in totally different mediums. As weird as that sounds, I prefer to watch science fiction and read fantasy. I don't actually know why that is, except that I really, really like starship visuals and space visuals. And I've certainly enjoyed both in all mediums, but that is my general preference. There's only a very few science fiction books, and most of them are quite a bit older, like Robert A. Heinlein era, that I like. I'm really addicted to in book form. Whereas like a lot of the modern fantasy and even like urban fantasy stuff is just absolutely fantastic. But there really are not that many great fantasy TV shows that I can think about. Whereas I can think of quite a few good science fiction ones. I mean, of the three you listed, I would happily engage in any of them. Whereas, like I said, with some of the fantasy stuff, especially, even Game of Thrones, I'm like, a lot of the visuals are not that great, and I don't know why that is, but that's just how I feel about it.
That's an acceptable answer. You're allowed to like what you like. So how did you first start your journey to liking the speculative fiction? What was it that brought you in?
So my dad, he was a naval officer, and his like story about how he got there is really strange, but it also like it made him in a lot of ways that are really unusual for most people. So he was born into like a family with like 9 children, a dad that died when he was 11. Mom had no experience in anything, worked 3 jobs, lived in a trailer home, like an entire sob story. And he ran away from home and lied about his age to enlist in the military. Well, runaway is not really what happened, but he left and lied about his age to enlist. And 2 years later, one of his officers was like, "Hey, Mr. Stovall, you're a pretty smart guy. You seem like you work really hard. I'm going to like forward your name to the officer academy if you want. and you can see what you can make out of yourself. And so he said, sure, not really because he wanted to, but just because he didn't know what else to do. And it kind of was like that, an officer and a gentleman thing. It really made him, like, it gave him a college education, but even more than that, he ended up becoming a nuclear engineer. And he started rubbing elbows with like a bunch of other nuclear engineers and like really smart people. And he discovered he loved science fiction. And so when he was in the Navy and a little bit after, he collected like a whole lot of books, like science fiction stuff, like, again, like Robert A. Heinlein and all the rest of that. And when he got out, he eventually got out of the military and became an attorney. And ironically, he made a huge amount of money through the Naval League. Apparently that's like an association group for retired naval people. And it got him in touch with a bunch of water engineers of all things. And he became like California's water district specialist because he knew enough about the engineering to talk to him and enough about the law to help him, get like bonds and stuff put together. And so he made pretty good money. So by the time I was born, he'd already been retired at that point for 4, 5, 6 years, and he had just made partner, and so he had enough money that he built a library, and all those books he'd been trucking around, he put in the library, and then he just kept expanding it. And so by the time I was like able to read, which I was kind of a weird start, I didn't even start reading at all until like 3rd grade, but by 4th grade I was reading like 2 books a day at 12th grade level. Like, it just turned on one day, and he had like 5,000 books, and it was mostly science fiction but some fantasy. And I just started reading it. That's also how I became a gamer, because he had a collection of Dungeons and Dragons stuff on like a high shelf that I climbed up and found when I was 10 years old. So my father is the short answer. The Navy being a really cool place is the long answer.
That's an acceptable answer. And as a Navy brat myself, I can appreciate that. So when it comes to gaming, because you mentioned you like to roll the dice, do you have a preference in that platform? What you play? Is it the standard dungeon crawl, or do you like some of the the sci-fi themed RPGs?
Neither. Actually, I like both, but that's not my preference. My preference is hyper role playing, political, empire building type stuff. We do other things as well, but we play just absolutely hyper complicated games. It's very, very complicated. I cannot overstate how complicated the games we play are, and they're like just worlds. By the time we're done with like the systems we play in, because again we invented our own, there's usually like 50 or 80 page characters. I know that sounds crazy, but most people like it.
Okay, so the systems that you play, do they have a vibe that's more fantasy or more sci-fi, or is it a little bit of both?
Usually more fantasy. We also do a lot of modern. And we do a lot of. Calling it urban fantasy really doesn't explain what's happening. More like system apocalypse, if you know what I'm talking about, where like an entire magic system gets overlaid on the mortal world, type of thing, like openly and obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you still find that you, now that you're playing, you're essentially, because you write LitRPG, has that affected the kind of games that you like, or is it still the same for you?
It's still the same. It's the other way around. I tend to write books with LitRPG systems that are frequently very complicated. I wouldn't say I'm the most complicated guy, but of the people I know, I'm probably second. And so, and the very first series I ever wrote was a magic system that specialized in economics and medieval economics. It's very bizarre, but yeah.
That's an interesting take on it. Was it well received?
Yeah, it's my second most well received after Demon Card Enforcer, the series, and it was pretty close. Demon Card Enforcer passed it this year, and Demon Card Enforcer's it's been around for I think about 2 years. And that one's a lot more traditional in the sense that it's like a first person type of thing. But the other series, I put it out 4 years ago, 5, and up until this year, and I think like 2 months ago, it was my best received series.
Okay. When it comes to the lit RPGs as a creator, do you like them to be a little bit more crunchy and math heavy, or does it you like it just kind of like an underpinning to show there's a game system, but more narrative focused?
Yeah, I'm famous for 3-page stat charts. I like them to be ridiculously crunchy, and I really try very, very hard. It's not even try; it just happens. But when I write them, they're deep into the story. It would take a lot to explain what I mean, but it's not like, oh, and then he got 2 extra points of strength. Woo! It's like his powers inform fundamentally how the story turns out, why he's able to do certain things, why certain things happen. Like people that read the stat charts will probably have a lot more clue as to where a lot of elements are going in the story. It just things like that, I guess. I've moved a little bit away from that. It's not actually because I necessarily want to. I've had to consciously make that decision because I think the genre as a whole is moving in that direction, and also because audiobooks, as a reader, a 3-page stat chart could be really fun, but as an audiobook, it's like 15 minutes of somebody just reading numbers at your face, and it's really irritating. So I've definitely started moving to a less crunchy, but that required conscious effort. The very first book I wrote is probably the single most crunchy thing I've ever written.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, how that translated to audiobook, because I've read some lit RPG, game lit, but it wasn't as crunchy. So, I mean, yeah, there was audiobook, but it wasn't like you were talking about pages long.
So mostly poorly. The exception, so I started in a genre called Dungeon Core, which is a subgenre of lit RPG, where the main character viewpoint is usually a sentient dungeon. Oh. And I think because everybody knew what they were getting into, my audio sales were decent, and they were actually fantastic. I wrote a sci-fi Dungeon Core, villain core. Sorry. And that one, and I've never understood this. I don't actually know what happened. It's the bizarrest thing, but for some reason, that one is like 70 or 80% of the money made is on the audiobook, whereas normally, like every other series I have, it's about a 70-30 split. 70 on the reading version and 30 on the audio. But one of my 2 Dungeon Cores, it never really hit with the reader base, but it just went crazy with the audio book base. And I think that's what confused me, because it took me a while to understand that that's not true for most lit RPGs, because I ran like two fairly large series that did fairly well in the with the reader base, but terribly at the audio level, and it took a while. But I try to remember one of the podcasts I was on, ironically, the guy like was talking to me about it, and he was like, dude, I'm gonna be honest with you, I love your series, but I was listening to one of the books because I had this like one tribe, and man, the stat charts go on for like 16 minutes. It's killing it. And so I started talking to people about it based on what this podcaster told me, and then I was like, oh, holy beans. And since it is a decent amount of money, and for a lot of the lit RPG, it is like 80% of their sales, and so I've cut down a little bit, or I separate it. That may sound weird, but I like give part of the chart here, part of the chart there, stuff like that.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just now starting to get into it. So I found one series that I liked, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Let me find some more. There's always, you find something like that when you get a new genre, and it's the one gateway drug, and you just kind of want more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, of course, for me, the problem is I also write reviews of what I read for Upstream, so that slows me down because I want to hit the next one, but I've just got to write the review. So, yeah. And of course, it's detailed review, so sometimes I'll read the book twice before I get the review out. So it slows me down just a little bit, but it also forces you to kind of figure out, like you talked about reading Game of Thrones, the first book, for the writing. Like it forces you both as a reader and a writer to figure out what you like and why you like it. In a way that's kind of fun that you don't really get after you leave college in English lit, that I can do for myself now. I don't need the professor directing me to read books I didn't want to read. I can do that same thought process for the fun of it on stuff I enjoy. So it's kind of fun for that respect. So, all right. So when you first started publishing, was that something, or writing? You said your wife was already publishing, and her interview will have already aired when you're listening to this, dear listener. Was that something that was on your radar before she started writing? Like you wanted to start writing novels, or did that kind of happen simultaneously with her?
Neither. So she, I'm sure she talked about this, but she's an attorney as well. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So she was an attorney, but she was only she never even really was an attorney. I mean, she is an attorney, but she did like 1 year of like assistant work with the drug court. And but by the time she was doing it, we already had a plan that she was never going to be an attorney. I think she did it just out of some sort of I want to have the experience type of thing. Explaining the history of how that all happened would take way too long and probably be way too boring. But suffice it to say, partway through law school, she had already determined she wanted to be an author. And we had already determined that I would support her while she did that. And so she took 6 years, although 2 of those she was working as a university professor. So only 4 years where I was actually supporting her. And basically got really, really good at writing. The book that everybody thinks was her second book that made her rich is actually her 14th book. And rich is a big fat quotes, but allowed me to retire, is actually her 14th book. She wrote 12 books that never got published before she felt confident enough. And then she put book 13 out, and that one didn't really do so well. And then she put book 14 out, and that's the one that like hit like crazy. And the whole time I was just being an attorney. And at the time, the plan was for me to remain an attorney indefinitely, but that was 6 years before. That was halfway through my total attorney career, and I hadn't yet completely burned out, frankly. And it was before I became parents counsel, which again is, it's really brutal. It's really brutal to see. It's very rare. We only had like 15 or 20 cases in the county in any given, time frame. Most of what we were doing was like just going back and checking up on people. But when it does happen, it's brutally, brutally depressing when kids get abused by their own parents. So I was never going to be an author. And even after she was successful, I was never going to be an author. But she had a couple friends, and one was like incredibly close to her. And that person was going to become an author. I don't think they ever did, but they were with her for like her whole journey as like a writing partner and stuff like this. And there was a whole situation, not going to go into the details, but suffice it to say, problems occurred. She's no longer friends with us. And my wife was crushed. And she told me one night that one of the things that really crushed her was that she wanted an author that she could talk with and stuff like that. And so before I had even decided I was going to retire, 50% to make Shammy happy and 50% out of spite to the other person, just to be like, haha, I'm going to be an author and you're not an author yet, even though you spent 6 years. I wrote a book in 2 months. It's my first series, my second most popular series, and it is a extremely boilerplate dungeon core with the theme changed. And the only thing that's unique is that there, to the best of my knowledge, at that time, there had not been a economics focused dungeon core book. And I put that out. I got pretty lucky. Nothing released for like a month before or 3 months after during the height of the dungeon core craze. And so my book took off pretty significantly, made a lot of money, actually. I think that's the only year where my authoring was basically the same as my, because I put a lot of them out really fast as my attorney money. And I kind of did it 50% because Shammy wanted somebody to talk about being an author with, and 50% just to be a jerk to this one lady. That was entirely my motivation. It's not in any way motivating. It's not in any way healthy. I don't know how else to tell you. It's not really good. But since it made money, I was like, the hell with it. I'll just keep going. I do enjoy it. And so I kept going.
Spite's a hell of a drug. Nothing wrong with it.
Dude, you'd be surprised how often my greatest accomplishments are out of rage. That's probably not healthy again, but I know we're not here to talk about this, but I do have an appellate decision in California that changed the law. First person in my 42-person firm to get that particular, attaboy. And it was motivated because the attorney in question I offered a deal to the opposing side a week before. She said no. I spent like 100 hours over a week just getting ready for this one trial. Morning of, she said she'll accept my deal. And I was so mad. I went to my client and I said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. She's accepted the deal, but I'm so angry. I want to go to trial anyway. Do you mind? And he said, no, that's fine. And so we had a giant trial, lost, and I was still so mad. I appealed it and did well enough to get the appellate decision switched. So yeah, spite is in fact a hell of a drug.
All right, on that note, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man. And then when we come back, we're going to dive into the series that brought us here.
Mythic heroes throughout history tamed creatures of lore to fight alongside them. Video games took up the mantle, and for decades, players adopted beasts for companions. Some had tigers, others lions, dinosaurs, some even had dragons. So when my consciousness was transferred into the most realistic virtual game ever created, I chomped at the bit, hoping to befriend a great beast to fight at my side. And what did I get? A porcupunk. Who needs a dragon anyway? Read a book.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the series that brought us here, the Demon Card Enforcer series. So where did you get the premise for this universe or this series?
Dude, I feel like every time you ask me a question, it's just going to be like the most jank answer ever, and nothing is ever inspirational. This is probably the single most non-natural book that has ever been created. I have an author friend named Ryan Tang. He's famous for Mimic and Me series, or most famous for the Mimic and Me series. And he comes to me for help with his stat stuff. He's a much more natural author than he is a stat builder, and I'm a much more natural stat guy than author, frankly. And he wanted a card book, which I think he's still going to put out, but he's kind of backburnered it for some other things. And so I put together an entire card system. And then when he backburnered the book, I said, hey, if you don't care, I'm just going to use my own card system because I'm in love with it now. I'm addicted to it. And I went to Shani and I showed it to her, and she was like, well, that's amazing, but you want to do one more thing. As an author, you want a card system where even if it's a card game, your main character can still be threatened. And so I feel like the one thing that I kind of bring to the table is I have what's called mantles. I mean, I bring a lot to the table, frankly, because it's a stat system, and I'm very good at those. But the mantle goes onto the character, and so they play as a part of the card system themselves, so they're still under threat. And so I had this cool system, but I didn't have a story for it. So I asked Shami if I could borrow one of her non-magical stories and convert it into a magical story. And I originally wrote it basically word for word and released it on, not word for word, sorry, beat for beat. I wrote everything completely new, but the story beats and the characters were translated into a magical world. And I released it on Royal Road, and there was a particular problem where the Royal Road audience, the LitRPG audience, really did not like one specific element of the story, but it was like a very major element. So I ended up rewriting the entire thing to cut that out completely, and then I re-released it on Royal Road. And it was very successful on Royal Road. I mean, not like super successful, but quite successful. And then it kind of snowballed, but that's where the original genesis is I made a stat system for somebody else. They didn't end up using it. I loved it so much that I wanted to write a story with it, and I asked to borrow a story, and then I had to rewrite the whole story. And so now it's pretty uniquely mine, but its genesis was from all these other things. I didn't, there was no magical moment where I had this cool idea. It's more like I just built a bunch of stuff, got in love with my own work, and just ran with it.
That's still acceptable answer. I mean, it's still your book at the end of the day. So
yeah.
I mean, we're not all going to have light bulb moments, right? Like, and sometimes when people say that, they're lying. So they like give you Robert Frost, The Road Less Traveled, is frequently cited as an example in an English lit class. And then when they asked him, because he sat in on the class, what kind of great grand message he was making, is like, no, I was going to walk and I wanted to see the fresh snow, so I went left instead of right, and I wrote a poem. And that was the extent of it. So sometimes, like, the happenstance will lead you in the right place.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening that have young kids that are, readers, how would you rate this story for people to see, what level of appropriateness it is for various readers? Like the movie theater, whatever works for you.
I would not suggest that young people read it unless their parents are extremely tolerant. There are darker elements. Am I able to talk about it on this podcast? I guess.
Yeah.
So graphic murder, extraordinary amounts of language, maybe not extraordinary, but very high. And not, I think, in book 1, but I think in book 3, there is references to past sexual abuse.
Okay.
So and there's a couple mildly sexual scenes. Now there's nothing on screen. There's nothing graphic, but it's still there in the earlier books. Although really graphic violence and tons of language is the real issue, I guess, until book 3. But some people have a problem with I hate the phrase, but trigger warning type of stuff. So, no, I guess I would just, I guess I wouldn't even have my own son read it until he was like 13 or something. So
that's fair. So this is available in all the formats right now, correct?
Yeah, it's available in hard physical copy, electronic copy, Kindle, audiobook. I think that's it. I don't think it's in any of the other forms yet.
Okay. So right now there are 3 books out in the Demon Card Enforcer series. Is that it? Is that all there is to the series, or is there more coming?
So for the series itself, there will be a 4th book, and then that will end the series. However, the world looks like it's going to be wildly bigger. I have a 3-book deal for another series set in that with Atheon. So for my direct books alone, there's going to be 7 of them. And then Casey Azell, who is a much, frankly, more successful and famous author than me, she's a 2-time Dragon Award nominee, wrote Shadow Card Guardian in the same universe. And technically the first series, or the second series, Card Apocalypse, the first book released on Railroad, I think. Although in a much earlier form, I've rewritten it pretty substantially at this point. So, and she's going to do a second book in that series, minimum, probably 2, might be 3. And then 2 other people, one has basically completed the book, and I've done a lot of the overviews of like the cards and the rule systems to make sure it conforms, and one of them is just starting. So I think at an absolute minimum, I'm going to do 7 books. Casey's going to do 2, and this other guy did 1. So I think 10 in the world, 4 in the series, and it's probably going to be at least 11 in the world because this other guy's writing. And then if either of the 2 of them do sequels, it'll be more. And then I have written part of an entire 3rd series set in the card, I guess, collected universe at this point. So for the series, yeah, just 4. But it's pretty broad. Everybody loves the system. I mean, Casey reached out to me to ask if she could write in the world, and she's a way better, like way more significant author than I am. So, it's I feel like the system sells people, even though my writing is not amazing. I know that I'm not selling my book really well here, but if you're a LitRPG guy and you want, it's enough that I have like 3 other authors reach out and hundreds of people on Discord make cards and stuff like that. So it's a really good system. It's a really good system.
I love the covers, especially the first one with the Cerberus dog. Although I wasn't as much of a fan of book 2 and 3's covers, where they made them 3 separate dogs. I like the Cerberus look. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So the most his absolute signature card is called Cerebu, and it's the 3-headed pup of Cerberus. But one of the cards that becomes pretty significant in his long-term build is, I think it's called, is it Lonely Hellhound? Lost Hellhound? Something like that. It's a little puppy hellhound that's a single-headed hellhound in book 2. And then at the end of book 2 and going into book 3, another card, the Malvier character, becomes extremely significant to him, and that's the one on book 3. So they're all technically representing different creatures. Cerebu is never split. He stays Cerebu the whole time, but I guess there's little puppy versions of hellhounds instead of a 3-headed big hellhound.
Okay. Now this this card system, is this similar to something like Magic the Gathering Pokemon kind of card system, or is it completely different than anything that's out there?
So it's technically completely different, but it bears some similarities to Magic. But there's a lot of differences. The player, I talked about this already, the player is part of the game. They have cards they can play on themselves, and the way to actually win is to kill the person. And it's not a game. I mean, you run around the real world like normal. If you summon a creature, it comes out. It's just there. It can fight humans. Humans can fight it. And it does not rely on like a power per turn effect. It relies on a power pool effect. And if you want new cards, you have to drop whatever you have out and pull something different, which is substantially different than Magic in terms of how it plays out. And the actual person playing the card system can level, allowing them to have more cards, more power, specialty cards. I have like 7 or 8 varieties of specialty cards that do things different than normal cards, et cetera, so that there's tons and tons of build options. So I guess it would play a little bit more like a tabletop game, because you can advance your own character rather significantly, allowing you to be better at the card game. The card game is not static. The players will have different capabilities pretty substantially.
So is he the main character, the only person with the cards, or do other people in the world have cards too?
Oh, everybody has cards. Not everybody. I'm sorry. It's technically 1 in 500 every 10 years. They call it drop night, and the gods give 1 in 500 people a deck of 10 cards, which is the absolute minimum you can have in order to be a player. The cards are inside your soul, and they play out in front of you, and you touch them to do what you want. And originally they play it 3 at a time, like 3 in a hand, but you can expand that. And then you get a certain number of cards you can have on the field if you can pay the power costs and such. But because it's every 10 years, the final number ends up looking more like 1 in 100. And a normal person that gets a hold of 10 cards can turn themselves into, we call them deck bearers, people that are involved in the game. So a lot of people have them. It's sort of an alternative version of an aristocracy, like a magical aristocracy at some level, but it's not truly an aristocracy because it's not self-sustaining to a degree, because the gods just pick 0.2% of the population every 10 years to be new players.
Can people refuse?
That's interesting. I've never thought of that.
You'll get back to us when you've decided for the story.
I have to admit, congratulations. I talked about how I figured out all these things in this super cool system, and you just came up with something I hadn't thought about, because it never occurred to me somebody would want to refuse to have a bunch of cool magical cards. It's not like you have to fight somebody or something. So interesting. I guess I didn't allow for it. It just, when I opened it up with the people that get the cards, it appears as, they feel it, and then they have the cards within them. So yeah, interesting though. That's an interesting question.
Well, until it is written or you have decided on your own, it is not canon. So it could go either way.
Yeah.
So the readers can decide until you write it and make it canon, or the people writing in your universe. Okay. So what can you tell us about the main character?
He is, he begins as an enforcer for a mob family. He doesn't like being an enforcer for a mob family, but he is very good at violence, and situations put him where he is. But he has genuine and solid affection for the head of the mob family, who saved him many years ago during the situations that put him where he is. So he's torn between his desire to not be a part of this life and his desire to defend the person that has genuinely and seriously taken care of him when he desperately needed help, 20 years before the start of this book. And it's into that situation that he becomes a deck bearer while he's part of this mob family. And the mob family, the head of the family, is already a deck bearer, and that he's made his 3 children deck bearers by buying cards from other people. And Wolfe becomes the 5th deck bearer within the mob family, but he's the only one that's not related.
Okay, so you can acquire them outside of what the gods decide if you finagle.
Well, the usual way is to murder a deck bearer, because then their cards drop out and you can take them. But there are other ways. There are overland monsters you can kill that will sometimes drop them. Dungeons appear and you can raid the dungeons to get cards. There are puzzle rooms, although I don't think I've actually dealt with a puzzle room yet. But I think Shadow Card Guardian had essentially a puzzle dungeon. If I'm remembering, I'm trying to remember how it's defined, but it definitely had puzzles within it for sure. But I don't think Demon Card Enforcer deals with puzzle rooms. But overland monsters and dungeons are both dealt with, and you can get cards that way. And if you get 10 of them, either by killing people or through these other sources, you can turn yourself into a deck bearer.
Cool. That's a complication I don't think you've seen anyone else do, where they can opt in that way. I don't think I've read any or seen any, because I've obviously been looking to see what else I want to read next that also had card system like that. There might be out there. I just haven't seen it yet.
I don't think there is. I'm fairly in touch with there's not that many people writing card system LitRPGs. All the Skills is the most famous one, but it's very, very different. I think at this point, I'm probably the second most famous that's a pure card system. Dungeon Crawler Carl has an internal game in like its 5th book, I think. Maybe the 5th or 6th, that involves a card system. And obviously Dungeon Crawler Carl is wildly more famous than me. But if you count it as a primary card system, I think I'm probably the second most famous, and I'm wildly different than any of the ones I am aware of, I guess.
So based on his ties to the mob, his fact that he's an enforcer for a criminal enterprise, would you say that your main character is an anti-hero then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't normally write anti-heroes. He's probably the only one I've ever written. It's probably the second one, actually. A really little weirder definition with one of the others, but he's very clearly an anti-hero. He starts as a bad guy, but good within the circles that he runs in, I guess. And he is more a danger to evil people than he is necessarily a force for good per se.
Okay. So through the course of this is the overarching arc him kind of trying to find his way outside of the mob family, or obviously no spoilers, but or is the arc more just winning the card game at all costs, or something?
No, there's no. It's not about winning the card game per se. There's no tournaments or anything like that. It's like you have card powers. Then if you end up in a fight with somebody, they have cards. You're now fighting each other with cards as well as stuff. But there's a running joke. My wife actually made a comic about this, which is it shows the Pokemon guy and he says, I play, a trap and defense position. And the Wolf character says, I play a mantle on myself. And the Yugi says, why would you play something on yourself? And then my character says, now I play a normal handgun in attack mode. So it's just sort of, the cards are more like just magic powers. And the real story is the use of these cool magic powers and the improvement of these magical powers in the card game over the course of the arc. And his actual arc is trying to save certain people, basically.
So you mentioned... Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Now, you mentioned that the gods drop these powers. So what kind of deific pantheon are you using for this? One of the established ones from like the Egyptians, the Norse, the Greeks, or is it something you made up for this universe?
A little bit of mix of both. So I technically have 22, I call them powers, but they're categories like mortal, golem, divine, infernal, fire, stuff like this. There's 22 categories, 12 types, and 10 energies. And each of them has a bunch of gods associated with them, but a lot of them, they're associated with more than one. And some of the gods are just made up out of nowhere. I made them up because I didn't feel that there was a god that occupied a position I wanted. Like, for example, there aren't a lot of golem appropriate gods, and dragon is one of the factions. There's not a lot of major dragon gods. I mean, there's a few, but not a lot of major ones. But for example, for the infernal cards, and he's demon card enforcer because technically he has a beast infernal deck, and his god is Cerberus, whose role is keeping the darkness within hell and the other people out of it. So you can imagine it plays into the anti-hero role.
He's kind of
all that
like character.
I'm sorry, what?
So he's kind of like a Punisher type character vibe.
He reaches that point. I would not say it starts that way. It definitely starts with more of a traditional anti-hero vibe, and he wants to save some people from the lifestyle he's living, and it kind of snowballs, and eventually he hits the point, but it's hinted at very early. It's extreme. I mean, this is all chapter 1, so I'm not really giving you spoilers here, but Cerberus specifically basically calls for him to kill 5 other deck bearers specifically, but all are involved in the mob somewhere. So eventually it reaches Punisher type stuff, but this occurs over the course of multiple books. This isn't like he just hunts 5 of them down right away. Sorry.
I was going to say, so with regards to the length of your books, because you're talking a lot of scope, are you writing Brandon Sanderson-esque lengths where it's like 200,000 words, or are you more normal 100,000 word?
I think they're all 95 to about 110, I think. So much more 100K. So this particular story is about a 400K, give or take, maybe a little over by the time it's done.
Okay. So was there any specific thing that inspired the main character the way you designed him, or did the plot come first and then you kind of built the character around that?
So technically, my wife Shami wrote a series of books, and this character is very distinctly based on a character from her book. I got all the ideas for the stat stuff first, and this one I needed a story to build my magical system around. I really liked one of the stories that she had written, so I asked to retell it in magical form. Again, it's been pretty heavily rewritten since then. It's not a match any longer, but the main character owes a lot to that original character.
Oh, and just for the readers, I realized the 100K word count number doesn't necessarily mean anything. That's about 400 pages if you're looking at a print book. So the for these stories, is, as you said, it's first person and he's the only main character?
No, it's third person.
Okay.
But he is the only main character. There is technically 5 chapters of the third book, I believe, that are told from a different viewpoint, but I believe that's it. I believe every other chapter is told from Wolfe's viewpoint.
Oh, I know what I was mixing up. It was the Dungeon Core. It was the first person.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So with this one, do you have any favorite secondary characters that really spoke to you when you were writing this book?
I think my favorite is actually Malviera, the card character. She's the viewpoint that's 5 chapters from the third book. Probably my favorite character, although she gets a lot less playtime than others. After that, probably a character from the second and third book by the name of Rhett, Rhett, that also features very heavily in the Shadow Card Guardian series by Casey Azell. I really, really like that character. He's a much more purely good, purely honorable, not anti-hero character that plays very interestingly with Wolfe's much more I do what needs to be done regardless of the legality of it and things like that.
Okay. So some of the questions I want to ask, because I don't care about spoilers, our listeners do. So let me ask you this instead. Would you want to live in this world?
Oh, for sure. It's just Earth with magic. There's
Yeah,
no
the magic could get you killed.
well, yeah, but I mean, so can a gun. The magic is like a gun. It's you don't have to do anything. It doesn't make you do anything. You just get these cards. The real incentive is you can get more powerful and even get things like greater lifespan and stuff like that if you get really cool cards. So I guess the gods create incentive to kill each other more often, and I implied that it does happen more often if you're in it, but it's not like, and then people are dying on the street left and right. It's more like there's another category of crime. Homicides are maybe twice as high as they would be elsewhere type of thing. So yeah, pretty absolutely. I would definitely want to live in this world. There's other worlds I would pick before this one, but I would absolutely pick this one if the option was yes or no only.
So where does this? Obviously, you said it's Earth. What city does this take place in? Is it existing city, or did you make one up for the story?
So technically, I made one up. It's called Noimor. It's a running joke because it's Mo Noir.
Oh,
because this is told in a very, very like noir detective vibe, I guess. Maybe not very, but it's got distinct elements of that. You know, flea bitten, hard bitten main character, the dame that gets him in trouble. You know, that kind of stuff. Even though it's fully modern, not set in like the 50s, 60s. But it's basically Chicago.
okay. Did you map it out in your head, or do you just kind of wing it when you write?
I mostly wing it. Well, I guess it depends on what you mean. If you mean the city or the story?
The city.
Yeah, I just wing it. I actually, it's going to sound really strange for somebody who's like all into numbers or whatever, but I have extremely bad visualization skills.
Okay.
Like it's really hard for me to see things in my own head as a like visual image. I can see it as a concept or interlocking concepts or numbers. It's going to sound really strange, but I can write on a blackboard in my head extremely easily and like see the numbers, which is, I guess, good visualization. But when it comes to like people, places, things, maps, etc., it just won't seem to form in my head.
That's fair. Is there anything about this universe that we didn't talk about that you think the listeners need to know before we wrap this up?
No. I think it's, I don't know how much of a selling point this is, but I feel like it's what I need to say because if you're this person, you're going to like it. But if you like extremely complicated, involved, and interesting magical systems, you're going to like this book. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's what I sell basically is extremely interesting and complicated magical systems.
So have you designed the magic system in this to the point where you could actually make this a game that someone could play with cards if they printed them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could show you just really easily. Am I allowed to drop stuff into like chat and whatever?
Oh, you could just show it on the screen. I'll just put you full screen if you've got it.
Well, no. It's a file, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I can download it and get it up.
Let me just really quickly.
This is just kind of cool idea, and like I said, I love the Cerberus cover. Like that, I just wanted to pet it. I know that's probably bad because it would eat me, but I just wanted to like toss it a Scooby snack and.
Yeah, actually, I designed him as a good dog. As weird as that probably sounds, but I really like dogs, which is a huge change. I didn't used to like them, but Shammy, it won't let me. Wait 1 sec.
Yes, women in your life have a way of convincing you to change your mind on certain things.
Yeah, quite a few. But I genuinely like dogs now, like a lot. And in a lot of ways, he's based on one of my dogs. Technically speaking, it's I reference my actual dog, Pierce, in the series as the dog that was the main character lost before the series starts. So I can't seem to send it to you, unfortunately.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's is it something that you share in your newsletter or in your Discord? Since those will be linked in the show notes.
It's all over the Discord, both me and other people, and it's all over my Facebook page. It's just the cards. I actually design them as cards, like I get images and stuff like that, and so yeah.
Okay, I will link to all that in the show notes then, because we've got your Discord and your website, and I'll link to your newsletter because that's on your website specifically. And then if you're curious about the cards, dear listener, you can go check it out. It's a click away because he has those available. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Is there a romantic angle subplot in this story?
There is. It's definitely there, but it's also not the primary plot. But the main character has one specific romantic interest throughout the series that he basically, I think, actually might be pursued by, but is certainly welcome to, and it grows over all 3 series.
So it's kind of a slow burn then.
Not really, more like a life burn. Like their relationship starts, I think, in book 1. But it grows, continues, all that stuff over the course of the books. But I don't play a lot of he said or will he won't he type of games with this. It's it becomes pretty clear pretty early, and it's more of a cozy. I guess that's what I would say. The romantic interest is more of the cozy component. It's his escape. It's his normal life. It's his happiness, more than like a romantic flurry type of thing.
So, would you want to hang out with this main character?
No, probably not. Most of the main characters I write are actually big nerds like myself. But there's 2 that I've written, and this is one of them that are not. And he is definitely not. He's much more badass. I am not badass. I am a very content nerd is the best way to say it. My badassery, that's like 30 years ago at best, and it wasn't all that much then.
Okay. Well, this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so do your part. It really does make a difference. And with that said, how might we track you down on the wild interwebs so they can buy this book themselves?
I'm all over Amazon. It's by far the easiest way to get a hold of me. I also have Royal Road stuff for the people that know what that is and use it. I have a Facebook. Technically, I have 2 Facebook accounts that you can go through. And as weird as this sounds, if they've already seen your podcast on Shammy, if you go to most of her stuff, you can eventually find all my stuff. And sometimes that's easier only because she's like 48 of the top 50 searches for her name, whereas there's a lot of John Stovalls, like a lot of them, if you're talking like across all of America. But there's like 0 Shammy Stovalls.
Yeah, that is a very unique first name.
Yeah. So if you look for her, you're going to get her, and then you can usually get to me. But if you look for me, I mean, there's like a basketball player. There's like 3 attorneys just from my home state alone that match me, and I'm an attorney, so it gets really confusing.
Were you related to any of them?
Nope. Actually, it would be very obvious because they're African American.
Okay.
But yeah, if you search for me, you're going to probably find them first. A couple of them are substantially bigger deals in the legal department than I was. So yeah, things like that.
Okay. Well, you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Substack, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Stabby Stab over there on Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee, tea, and hot chocolate until they get high on their own supply. If you want some of that coffee brand coffee, the link is in the show notes. The discount code is Podcast Grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Hanley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, this was a lot of fun, John. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, and with that, we are going to call it a night, people. Wait for it.